Leon Charney Report. And now, here is your host, Leon Charney.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report, and today we're going to make you book smart. We have Thane Rosenbaum, who was on many times with us. He's written a past book about the Holocaust and his parents. We'll go into it in a minute. And Nessa Rapoport, who I remember is a hotshot editor for names like Ezer Weitzman, is now the president of Israel. Jimmy Carter, you remember him. He did Camp David, also the president of the United States. And Lee Iacocca, who probably gave her a Chrysler after he did the book. Nessa, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So you're involved now with Jewish Renaissance of literature?
I hope so.
So what does it mean?
I think it means that there's a resurgence of young writers who are finding their Jewishness interesting in all kinds of ways and using it as a source for fiction.
Like Thane Rosenbaum?
As a random example.
And Nessa Rapoport, her book in 1985, Preparing for the Sabbath, is really one of the major pieces of literature that came out of the sort of, what I would say, the third generation of Jewish American novelists. And her book is really a major contribution to that effort. And then here we are now in 1997, and Tikkun magazine, which I work for, is
Lerner, right?
Michael Lerner.
Lerner. Tell me, first of all, what happened with Hillary Clinton and Lerner? He was at one time her Rebbe.
Right. Well, I think that she resented having a Rebbe, and she, I think, and for all that little I know about it, is that once the Washington Post started to make Michael Lerner appear as though he was a spiritual guru for the Clintons sort of dropped their affiliation with him.
But Michael Lerner is either an iconoclastic character or a Renaissance man. Am I correct? Or both?
I think he is a Renaissance man and a genius. I truly think that he's almost not given enough credit for being a major Jewish and American political and social thinker.
All right, Tikkun magazine, you're not a literary editor, correct?
Yes, for the last
Nessa, you
year.
write for them too?
I have.
She's written in many different ways for us. Well, this most recent issue, our November-December issue, which is
Jewish
entirely...
Literary Revival.
It's all about what Nessa was talking about, that there seems to be a revival of Jewish American literature. And interestingly, it seems to be by third and fourth generation Jewish Americans and children of Holocaust survivors who are returning to classic Jewish American themes, even though they are fully assimilated in many ways and fully secularized, and yet perhaps there's something deeply mystical about the Jewish soul that still finds itself expressed as in a Jewish artistic way. In fact, Nessa's essay in this piece entitled Love Stories is really a deeply powerful piece that speaks to the sort of internal essence of what it means to be a Jew, and that even Jewish writers who you don't think have any more of an attachment or association with sort of shtetl life or immigrant life or Lower East Side experiences still are somehow returning to something that is deeply visceral, is deeply spiritual for them, and maybe it's related to the overall Jewish renewal movement, or maybe it's something about just Jewish art. But what's interesting about this new tikkun and about this conversation that the magazine is engaged in is that this revival is being undertaken by Jews who you would think artistically have choices. They could write about anything, and yet they're returning to classic Jewish American
themes. Are you doing
themes.
that, Nessa, for love or to make a living, or both?
Certainly not to make a living.
Right, so...
Talk to most writers. I'm doing it out of passion because it's the thing that interests me most. And I think it was Singer who said every writer needs an address, and he wasn't speaking about a street. He was speaking about the place out of which the deepest feeling comes. For me, this is the stuff of my work.
All right, but is there a market for this? Look, you worked on Iacocca's book, sold millions of copies. Weitzman did pretty well. Jimmy Carter's book, these are bestsellers for Bantam. You worked at that time.
Right.
And you know what the literary field is like. Is there a market for new Jewish literary figures?
Depends what market you're looking for. In other words,
financially, can they make a living?
Some can.
Really?
Yeah, but that's not the only kind of market a writer's interested in.
Right.
That's what you also care about. Are there passionate readers out there for whom your work resonates? You're speaking directly to their hearts. They come up to you and they say, your book changed my life. It means so much to me. I mean, my novel that Thane mentioned is 17 years old. I hear about it every single week. It's remarkable for that to happen.
That's
so
wonderful.
does it translate into my bank account? I don't care.
No, but there has to be, Thane has
I
to
have a
make
job.
everybody.
Like most writers.
What's your job?
I work for a Jewish Educational Foundation.
And Thane, but you make a living out of, I mean, is there a market? I mean,
Well, let me just say
sincerely.
what I do. I mean, I work for this magazine. I'm a law professor at Fordham Law School. I teach writing at the New School for Social Research, and I write fiction. I mean, I need to do all of these things to make a living. Not one of them alone would allow me to sustain myself. But I think Nessa's point is a good response to your question. I mean, is it John Grisham money? No. I mean, there are very few literary people who actually...
No, my question is this. Are you supported by a real audience? There are maybe some passionate people who want to read your books. It'd be interesting to me to know that there's a massive or a very strong audience out there for new Jewish literary figures. That's what I'm saying.
I think the question is, are you supported by the right audience? You know, for writers, it starts from here and goes outward. You're asking an outward-inward question. The real point is, can you keep working because you believe there are people who are listening? I think, unquestionably, for all the writers, the answer is yes. But the other thing is,
there
if you
enough
read,
support out there?
you have to take the long view. Now, first, you have to live long, and second of all, if you read enough memoirs, you know there are writers who were undiscovered and marginal for decades, and then suddenly their moment comes, they're talking to a certain consciousness, and everybody's reading them.
Henry Roth?
Well, that's a really good example, right? I mean,
Right,
and I'm just
extremely good
really
example.
the best example. I mean, but I would say that even all of the writers that we're perhaps most proud of as Jewish Americans struggled through periods where, even though they had readerships, they probably couldn't have survived financially on that, on whatever.
Well, but let's take Elie Wiesel, who writes a lot of books, and I think he's nearly got into the mainstream.
Now.
Yeah.
Now.
Ask
Ask him in the
happened
1960s.
about Night.
Right, ask him what happened in the mid-60s. It's a very different experience. I mean, look where we're at here. The real question is what Nessa said, long view. For us, what's essential is to keep the conversation going, to keep the narrative going.
Okay,
But Night is a very good example. I actually published one paperback edition of Night, which is by any standards a classic.
when did he write that? It was,
He wrote it in the 50s. He could not get it translated into English
Right, it was
for the longest time.
published in France
Published
first,
in
and even
France.
then it wasn't published immediately, right? I mean, I
No,
think it
it
took a
took-
while to get published in French.
All right, is this happening only in America, or is this happening worldwide? As a French fellow, what's his name? You must know him. He writes, he's a prolific writer in France. I can't remember his name. He won a fiction award there, and then they claimed that they were anti-Semitic. He didn't want to take the award. We were lost. All right, I'll have to find out his
It's okay.
name and bring it back on the tape. Are there other people outside the United States doing this? Israelis, English,
There
French?
are South American Jewish writers.
Really?
I was one of my stories that I wrote 10 years before I could get it published is recently be reprinted in an English anthology of Jewish writing, which I think is new to England. The answer is yes.
I mean, I think that what's really interesting here is that there was a time in the 80s. I mean, I think Nessa needs to be credited for in writing Preparing for the Sabbath for so many reasons, but among which is that there was a time in the 80s after kind of what's known as the Holy Trinity of Jewish American writers, Saul Bellow, Bernard Malamud, Philip Roth, Cynthia Ozick to some extent as well, that there was sort of a silence. The Jewish Americans had so fully assimilated. Well, they were so fully assimilated. This is exactly what Irving Howe had predicted, and then Nessa, in a book that she had published with, had edited with Ted Solotaroff.
But Thane, do you really believe that a true Jewish writer can really assimilate?
Well, but this was happening, Leon. A lot of Jewish writers had blended themselves in out of oblivion. They had become so secularized that their work, although they had Jewish last names, their work really in some ways didn't really reflect Jewish American themes.
But you'd always find a drop in there. If you read Bellow, you could always find something Jewish.
But we're talking post-Bellow. We're talking about sort of this 1980s period. I think what's happening now is that you're seeing young Jewish American writers who have the choice to write something else, and yet they are returning with a vengeance. I mean, even the titles over the last few years, While the Messiah Tarries, Elijah Visible, Mazel, right, Rebecca Goldstein's novel. These are the people who are going to be appearing on December 4th at the New School for Social Research in connection with this Tikkun issue on December 4th at 8 o'clock at the New School on West 12th Street. We're going to have a live performance of all of these writers will be in appearance.
What, you expect a huge audience?
I'm hoping. I mean, I'm hoping we're appearing on your program. I mean, we're putting out
Today's show, tomorrow?
Right, today's show. Well, is there anything more important than Leon Charney
I
Report?
doubt it.
Right, well, then why go on
I'm known
anything
for
else?
my humility.
That's why we're here. You know, I think we're trying to engage people in the sense of a revival.
I think you're doing a great thing. I think it's a terrific service to Judaism and to Jewish revival. I think it's like the Young Turks out there trying to renew something that wasn't around in the 80s. And Jonathan Rosen was on the show with his book. He's done a great job.
He'll be there on
He's a
December 4th.
literary editor of The Forward. He does a terrific job, and it's a bunch of young Turks. And I give credit to you and kudos to you. My question is, and that's why I put you on the show, you know, I'd like a lot of people to get involved in it, to understand it, and I want to deliver that message to them.
I believe, and I don't know what Nessa's thought is, I believe the market is in fact even larger, but they don't know it. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people...
I think you're right.
I think that they're even larger, but they themselves don't realize that there are people out there who haven't quite tapped into the revival of Jewish American writing, that they were reading in the 60s and they haven't been reading for 30 years, and they don't realize that there is a new wave a resurgent new wave of Jewish American
writing.
writing.
Ask people who great Jewish writers are, you'll get Bellow, Malamud,
Right.
and
Right.
you know, you go down the line,
I agree.
maybe even Herman Wouk, and it's a different field totally what you people are doing. I've read your book, it's very deep.
Thank you.
And very passionate. Not that the others are not, but it's a very deep book.
Well, thank you.
Nessa, you have seen, we know each other a little bit of time, a tremendous revival in Orthodox Judaism, and especially by women. And you've participated, I think, in some of that. What has brought that about?
Well, I don't want to speak about Orthodox in the sense of a formal political denomination, because I think when it comes to writing, people label return to use of traditional sources or engagement with traditional language as, quote, Orthodox. My feeling is Jewish literacy should be spread across all American Jews, and I think one of the things that's happening is that Jewish writers are starting to get interested not only in Jewish lives but Jewish letters, looking back to this enormous history of Jewish poetry, biblical commentary, rabbinic sources, and saying, how could I use some of this in my art? How could I use some of this in my work? How could I engage in this? Writing fiction from today,
Right.
looking back. We know the history of the English language of literature. What about this history, which has been written in Yiddish and Ladino and Hebrew, things that are very obscure? So that's being called a return to tradition. Whether it's translating as Orthodox people practicing Orthodoxy is a totally different question. My prediction is, my optimistic prediction is that all kinds of Jewish writers are going to start to find that literature interesting and use it in a range of ways, from satiric to devotional.
You agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we're really seeing. We're seeing people connecting to some kind of spiritual life, spiritual past. I mean, I think that it maybe speaks to a real feeling of emptiness, a lack of human connectedness, a spiritual void. And we're seeing that in religious practices where people are returning. We're seeing this sort of incredibly intense Orthodox revival on the Upper West Side. And what I think is really unique about even sort of the Jewish literary revival is that in the 60s what you saw is Jewish Americans running away from their immigrant pasts. Right? We identified with them as though they were Jews, but they were in many ways self-hating Jews in some ways, or self-critical or Jews. But what you're seeing
Well,
here
I'd
is...
say this, that if you went to a campus in the 60s, you wouldn't find anybody with a yarmulke except the Yeshiva University.
Right.
Today you'll find people with yarmulkes all over the place, no matter where you go.
Well, Jewish writing now is not running away, it's returning.
Right.
It's really
There's
speaking
a
to
whole-
the kind of cultural revival that Nessa's talking about.
It's
really
not only in revival of literature, it's just a revival.
Right.
I mean, I was in a court today. The clerk in the court was wearing a yarmulke. I mean, 20 years ago, this would never have happened. So there's this terrific revival that's going on. And maybe you're right. Maybe there's a tremendous search for spirituality. And people are finding it their own ways. Now, you people, I mean, the new Jewish literary figures are really helping this because you're getting people in touch in a very interesting way, in a very important way. And you don't have to go to a synagogue
Right.
to get involved with Judaism through Jewish literary figures.
Right, and in fact, what we would say is that what our work does is it touches people in a contemporary setting. We're writing about modern Jewry and the problems, the encounters, the relationships that are experienced in this community without having it to be fully referenced to an old world life. And yet at the same time, there's part of the irony that Jewish American writers, or third and fourth generation, are returning to immigrant experiences. There's some mystically going back to sort of a Lower East Side aesthetic. And I find that absolutely fascinating because they don't have any first-hand experience to
So
that.
Ratners will be resuscitated now.
Yes, I think the Blintz is coming back.
We'll come back with a Kreplach. We'll be back after a break to talk more about Jewish literary figures and what it's doing to Americana. And we'll ask two questions. Number one, what does the Holocaust have to do with that revival, which Thane touched upon? I think he's really written a book about it. And two, what's Israel's part in this whole business? We'll be right back. We're back. We're talking with Thane Rosenbaum, who is the literary editor of Tikkun magazine, and they are holding a seminar on December 4th at the New School, which is on 12th Street, I think, right, Thane? And it's a symposium about all the new Jewish literary figures, American, that we're talking about now. So if you have a chance and you want to be upgraded into an intellectual atmosphere, you'll come here, Thane, and Nessa talk about the revival. Nessa, you've had a great feeling for Israel, I know. And has Israel touched these literary figures?
It's a mix, wouldn't you say? Some, yes, who've had personal experience and draw on it.
Name me. Tell me. Amos Oz?
Well, that you're talking about Israeli writers, but I'm talking about American Jewish writers.
Who've been touched by Israel.
Well, I think the most public example is probably Philip Roth.
Right.
Wasn't he?
The Counter Life.
Didn't he teach at one time at Tel Aviv University? Oh, no, that's the other fellow. By the way, the man that we were looking for in France before is Marek Halter. You know him, Nessa? You've heard of him?
I've heard of him, certainly.
You've heard of him. By the way, he agented the book for Yitzhak Rabin's granddaughter, Noah. Book of her grandfather's, the speeches or whatever she did in that book. I don't think it was a massive bestseller, but it's a historic book. So, is Israel a passionate part of this literary attachment, or it's 50-50? They don't touch Israel.
I wouldn't say it's dominant, would you?
Well, you know, they have their own literary tradition, their own literary culture.
No, what I'm saying, and Nessa understands
For the writers
me.
we're talking about.
Well, it's mixed. I mean, I think that one thing that...
Have you been to Israel, Thane?
No, I'm embarrassed to admit I have not. I mean, my understanding about what in order to respond to your question, is that there are some writers who have made Aliyah and have gone to Israel. So they're actually Americans who are writing from Israel and writing in English about the experience of the diaspora returning home. So I think that's a different kind of touching.
Well, I have an answer for it. I think Israel at this time is at crossroads and trying to find its own spirituality.
Right.
And I'm not sure that a literary figure at this point in America will find Israel spiritually uplifting for him at this moment. The conflicts are so great now in Israel. I'm sure you're aware of this, maybe you're not, but you know, the new law with the conversion and the Orthodox, Reform, and Conservative, and the splits between the different segments of Judaism, it's split the country. Now, if you go to Israel, by the way, most Israelis don't care about it, but they are, in a sense, traditional. So if they are atheists, some guy used the term today, I forgot, he says, I'm an unorthodox traditionalist, whatever that means, you know. Everybody comes up with phrases. But you go to Israel on a Passover, everybody will have a Seder. You might go there on Yom Kippur, it's really quiet, but they'll say, I'm not Orthodox. But they'll observe something. They're trying to find themselves now. And that came, in my opinion, when Israel won the Six-Day War, because you had what we called land Zionists, people like Moshe Dayan who worshipped the land. This was the whole concept of Zionism. Now they had the land, so they found their spirit already. So where do they go now? And I think that Israel will be a mecca, ultimately, for types of writing that you're doing, Jewish writing.
I think every Jewish writer has a point of passion that he or she connects to. For me, Israel's critical. I'm there almost every year.
Yeah, I know.
Unlike Thane, and I, speak Hebrew and feel very, very engaged and interested in my discourse with Israel. Their Yiddish culture is also enjoying a revival.
Exactly.
If you look at Tony Kushner and Donald Margulies staging, Yiddish plays. I think there's such a richness. What I wanted to say that connects your question about Israel with the Holocaust is so much of stories is rooted in memory and translation of memory. If you're a people who's lost a third of your people in a century, you've lost not only a third of your physical entity, you've lost a third of your memory, a third of your stories. One of the things that I think is happening now is not just nostalgia or even a certain amount of time has passed, but a genuine recognition that we were cut off from this unimaginable trove of people who might have translated what was into contemporary idiom.
We're going to
They're
have,
just
by the
gone.
way, after you followed you on the show, is Napthali Lavie, who's a child of the Holocaust. He and his brother, who's Rabbi Israel Lau, who's the chief rabbi of Israel, survived, and he's written a book, and we're going to bring him on and talk about this also.
Well, that's actually, for me, it's although I acknowledge that I've never been to Israel, for me the mothership is still Poland. I mean, I've been there several times, and my next novel is set.
Are you passionate about Poland?
Yeah, I feel that that's where, to me, that's really that's the scene of the crime. That's the scene of the accident. And for me, I have my own sort of mystical feelings about Aliyah for Poland, not for me personally, but sort of a psychic, spiritual return to a place that where
I don't want to disappoint you, but I had the ambassador on from Poland to the UN. He was a very nice man. And he told me anti-Semitism is indigenous to our culture.
That's why we should be going back.
Why?
That's exactly the
To
point.
change the culture?
No, I'm saying that's an unfulfilled mission. There is
You want to book a plane to Poland now, Nessa?
I'm a Zionist. And I like that every country has depleted itself Jews because what's in culture and economy down the tube.
No, there's no doubt.
Expel the Jews.
Anybody who's been to Poland will see that nothing works anymore. So we know maybe why that's true. Nothing works. But the point is that when Nessa speaks so eloquently about this.
Go further on that. I'm interested. You would like to see an Aliyah to Poland?
I'm sorry, to see what?
Aliyah.
Yeah, I think that is another unexplored aspect of Jewish life. That is that we talk about revival of Yiddish
Thane, that's
plays.
interesting. Explain to me what you mean
We
by...
really tried our best in Poland, Thane.
Yeah.
I don't think we can give it anymore.
Explain to me what Aliyah means to you.
I mean, I'm saying that we should make a mass immigration back. I'm saying that I understand the idea of returning to that Polish East European life. For most American
Shtetl life, you mean?
not necessarily shtetl, but the idea of being part of Eastern Europe. I mean, Zionism as a physical reality is new, right? It's still in its infancy. I mean, the basic idea of having an Israeli homeland. There is another life. I mean, the life that Nessa was talking about, this sort of 1/3 of European Jewry was slaughtered.
Right.
That world is a world that, sadly, could never be recreated. And I think that that's, to me, what's really mystically interesting, the idea of trying to return, because I think that's what's going on with some of these writers. I mean, Steve Stern's work, where he recreates shtetl life, but does it in Memphis, Tennessee. It's really fascinating. You think you're reading something out of a Chagall painting when you're reading his work, but it's out of Memphis, Tennessee. When you're reading,
Nessa would probably rather do it in Sfat, you know?
I'm more interested in what role those places that are now imaginary have in moving us forward, in negotiating with our modern life. I'm less interested in trying to recapture them or
He has an interesting
recreate
theme,
them.
though. He does. It's an
Right,
interesting
undeniably
thesis.
interesting.
yeah, I mean, I actually think what Nessa's saying is...
I mean, I'm sure half my viewers are going to book a plane to Poland tonight, right?
Well,
find their ancestral literature.
I think that what Nessa is saying is absolutely right, that what we're seeing here is an attempt through the imagination to go there. And I'm saying that is, as much as I am incredibly in awe of that artistic journey of returning from an imaginary standpoint, I would also like to see us actually physically return, not even necessarily to live, but to acknowledge the presence, acknowledge the loss and that destruction, and to say, this was our home too. This was our home in an incredibly deeply profound way. And that's what American Jewish life, in many ways, descends from. It descends from those immigrant experiences of Russia and Poland. And so as we've recaptured our life here, or recreated life here, and recreated it in Israel, to me, there is, in going forward, there is also still not just nostalgia, but just the physical reality of the absence of that life, the destruction of that life. And I want us to go forward, but also with an ongoing recognition of memory of what that was about, and not to abandon it.
It's interesting.
Not to abandon it.
I think in our personal lives,
Were your parents from Poland?
Mm-hmm.
my grandparents on one side were, and I was lucky enough to know someone for many, many years in my family who came from that world and left for Jerusalem in the 20s. And I couldn't hear enough of her stories because that's ownership of my past. In that sense, I do agree with you. 1 degree away is this displaced whole other centuries and centuries of life for many of us.
It's an accident of history that we're here. I mean, for my family, it's an absolute, it's an accident.
You're a Holocaust child, right?
Without the Holocaust, I would not be here sitting at this table. There would be a Leon Charney Polish report. I might have been on that show. But
No cups.
But that's why.
They can't afford them.
This is what I come for, the Leon Charney report cup. No, I think that we have
It's
to...
interesting. I mean, it's a theory, and I think you have to explain it very well to people because your first reaction will be negative. Why go back to Poland? I mean, as a man who's coming on, I said Napthali Lavie, and I'm not sure he'd want to go back to Poland, and he's a survivor. And
But we are going back psychically. See, that's what this literary revival in many ways is about. People are psychically still connected
I am
to
not
those...
against you. One
they're
thing,
they're not leaving, and the fact that Tony Kushner's play is on Broadway, and the fact that Donald Margulies has revived The God of Vengeance, the Osh play in Seattle, on both coasts of the United States. I mean, think about this, Leon. This is extraordinary.
I'm going to
me.
help you out more than you think, but go ahead, finish your
No,
sentence.
I mean, this is extraordinary. In New York and in Seattle, we have revived two of the greatest plays of Yiddish theater.
Right.
The most important Jewish dramatists are being revived. I actually saw that play last night. I saw Tony Kushner's play. It is the recreation of with beautiful sets of of shtetl life. That's being done in Seattle and New York at the same time. We are returning. We're returning. We're not letting that go.
Now, if I could inject a personal note there, which actually validates some of what you're saying, I can remember two things. One was being in school and being told by a Holocaust survivor teacher, do you realize that before the war there was a Rapoport rabbi in every town in Europe? This has haunted me.
Wow.
The second is that Ansky himself, who wrote the Dybbuk, which is the Tony Kushner play, was a Rapoport.
I'm going to help you.
That's right.
I'm going to help both of you.
I mean, that's the past.
I'm going to help you both. You're intense now. You want to know how I'm going to help you.
Well,
You're excited. I
I'm
can see
eager.
it. All right. In my former life, when I used to hang out with Jimmy Carter and Asa Weitzman, I was a cantor. And the night that we finished Camp David, maybe Naphtali was there, I'm not sure. I was at the Madison Hotel or the Hilton Hotel, and Yigal Yadin, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, Shmuel Tamir was there. All they wanted to hear, these were Israelis, born Sabra boys, all they wanted to hear was cantorial music. Cantorial music emanates from Russia and Poland.
Right.
It's exactly what you're talking about.
And look at the revival of klezmer.
Did I help you out now?
You beautifully, Leon.
You
We
think
work so
people
nicely
come
together.
December 4th
I hope
to
so.
Tikkun's literary,
At the New
after
School.
they hear all this, maybe we'll do some cantorial singing there. I mean, that
Well,
might help.
I would-
There's a revival of cantorial singing, which really translates into what you're saying.
And klezmer
spirituality.
music.
Right.
Klezmer music,
I mean,
absolutely.
to me, what is this really symbolizing? We're not finished yet. We're not finished with that world. We're obviously, internally, we're still deeply rooted in that European immigrant past. And no matter how far, no matter how many PhDs, how many law degrees, no matter how successful we can become, somehow we're still deeply...
Could I do it without
profoundly
making aliyah there? Could I just sort of get segments of it and then...
And if
Right.
you're an outsider, you mentioned women before.
Right.
The perspective you have on a very venerable ancient tradition as someone who is somewhat outside as a woman makes for fantastic works of art and creativity. I don't think it's an accident that so many women are engaging in this. You have great freedom. You never could have been that Hasidic boy portrayed in those plays, so you
Right.
can look at it with a very different lens.
Right.
But you
Oh.
want it. You want it in your translation, for your version.
It's a phenomenal revival, and you're right. In order to revive, you have to go back to your past, and how you reach that past is everyone's choice. But I think your thesis is correct, and we see it all over. And you're right. It's especially, I see it very much in music. And